I used the same non-meta team for 30 battles straight. What did I learn? Stay tuned to find out. A couple of months back I set myself the task of getting a 50% win rate over 30 games with a team of rarely used Pokemon. I wanted to have the tools and answers to combat the meta, but without going for the obvious choices. Whilst I didn't quite reach that 50% win rate, I definitely achieved my aim of being able to beat meta teams with underused Pokemon. You can go back and check out other episodes in the playlist to see some of the victories I had over some strong meta teams. In this video I'm going to share what I learned from the process and try to offer something a bit different. There's a lot of content on how to build a team and people talking through their decision process as they play, as I've done on previous videos. But there doesn't seem to be much advice other than just play a lot when it comes to actually using a team effectively. So here's a couple of things I learned on my journey to be a better player, and I hope you find them useful. Firstly, the meta works both ways. The meta can make your opponent predictable in terms of what moves or strategies they're going to use. But it can also make your opponent assume they know what you're going to do, and you can use that against them. When you look at Team Preview and you see an Amoonguss, you're pretty sure it's going to use Rage Powder. Grimmsnarl will set up screens and Calyrex will go for their spread moves. A strategy that's easy to predict is easy to counter, so learning the meta is a first and obvious step to getting better. This works both at the Team Preview stage, where you work out the team's overall strategy, and for individual Pokemon and the moves they'll use. For example, we can learn that Kyogre will usually use Water Spout or Orange Impulse, and Zacian will usually use Behemoth Blade. However, what also generally seemed to be the case was that if there was a Kyogre on the team, it would be a starter, and Zacian would start off in reserve. This means I needed to put my Zacian counter in reserve when a Kyogre was present as well. As much as the meta means you can predict what someone else is likely to do, you can also use that against them. My team contains a Togekiss with the move Follow Me. For a time, Togekiss was popular in the meta because of its Serene Grace ability, which increased the likelihood of secondary effects kicking in for moves. Serene Grace coupled with Air Slash meant you would be more likely to get a flinch on an opponent. People saw my Togekiss and assumed it was going to go for that move. When it went for Follow Me instead, they were in trouble. For example, my opponents using Dragon moves, expecting to hit the Regidrago standing next to Togekiss, instead did nothing in return. You can do something unorthodox as far as the meta is concerned, and your opponent's expectations can be used against them. Can I use a Pokemon people will expect to be used in one way, in a different way? As well as using the meta to predict or misdirect, you can also bring some decidedly non-meta Pokemon and make use of people's general ignorance of those choices. Hands up who knew that Luxray can learn Psychic Fangs. Anyone? Luxray is a very unpopular Pokemon, but it has nice utility in the form of Eerie Impulse and Psychic Fangs. If I see an unfamiliar team or Pokemon in the team preview, that creates uncertainty, which could lead me to make a bad selection. On one occasion, a Grimmsnarl ended up wasting 2 turns against me because I used Psychic Fangs, breaking both screens it just set up. On another, in combo with Aegislash, I one-shotted a Grimmsnarl, which obviously thought it was safe. If my opponent had known their screens would be shattered, I doubt they would have tried to put them up. If you can find something that is useful against the meta, that isn't well known, you can use your opponent's ignorance to spring the surprise and gain an advantage. Can you dig through the move pool of a Pokemon and find something that's useful that others likely won't know about? Repetition is the key to improving in most things, and it's no different in Pokemon. The more battles you play, the more you get to know how each of your Pokemon will work, not just individually, but together. The more you'll see which moves you never use or which are underwhelming. Although you can calculate likely damage from any given attack onto any given opponent, it just isn't the same as doing it live. And starting to get a feeling for how battle is going, what you can expect your Pokemon to achieve, in any given situation. The more familiar you are with your team, and the more situations you've played them in, the easier you'll find it to make decisions about what to do the following turn. That's why it's usually worth playing any battle to a finish, even if you're pretty sure you're going to lose. Use it to see how a certain Pokemon performs. The transition from normal singles gameplay against the computer to online battles is a harsh one, and it's simply worth recognising you need to be patient and get beaten a lot before you start to understand how different situations resolve and start to be able to be proactive in your battle choices. Think about how Pokemon performed last time it was in this particular situation. What could you expect it to achieve now with its attacks? Will those two Pokemon acting together be enough to take something out? Those are the sort of questions you can ask yourself and try and answer as you build up experience with your team. My usual lead was Regidrago with Togekiss. Togekiss used to follow me, and Regidrago went for Dragon Energy. The combo could usually do enough damage without Dynamaxing to take out one or two of the opponent's Pokemon. This usually meant I had my Dynamax ready to bring out in the late game, which further strengthened my ability to counter whatever my opponent had on the bench. Although Dynamax has massive offensive potential, once you go for it, you're committed. Your Dynamax ends or your Pokemon faints if you want to get the full 3 turns. Dynamaxing early whilst your opponent still has 3 or 4 Pokemon means it's easy to counter or nullify your Dynamax altogether if they have a safe switch in. I realise you have to resist the urge to attack the juicy, obvious target with a Dynamax, because your opponent is just as likely to see what might be coming and make a change. Generally, it seems better to hold off on Dynamaxing until you see what other Pokemon your opponent has, or they've committed to their Dynamax. I think it works better as a strong counter rather than an opening hammer blow. Many battles which look to be going in one player's favour have ended up turning the other way in the end. The more you can exhaust your opponent's big threats before bringing out yours, the better. One final reflection I had on battling was about the fear factor. Strong Pokemon such as Zacian, Calyrex Shadow and to a lesser degree Calyrex Ice come with a fear factor. They hit very hard and they're either tough or fast or both. When I started out and I saw one in Team Preview, I felt like it was game over. I'd make bad choices because I'd be too focused on the obvious threat. However, as I learned to counter these Pokemon, I became even more confident to do so because I'd seen they did have weaknesses I could exploit. And inversely, by putting my opponent's position into my mind, thinking about how they might be feeling, I could better predict how they would attack. My Regidrago and Togekiss combo usually resulted in at least 1, maybe 2 turns where Regidrago got to do massive damage pretty much unhurt, while Togekiss took the hits. This means my opponents would often focus on killing and presenting itself as a big threat in the 3rd turn, as soon as Togekiss was fainted. I therefore often used Protect in the 3rd turn, which meant my opponent did very little or nothing for a turn, while Togekiss did damage. High damage dealing Pokemon draw aggression for themselves, and you can use that to predict where your opponent's going to attack and counter them. So what did I learn from my 30 games? How to use the meta to predict or misdirect, how to surprise my opponent with something obscure, how to be patient with Dynamax and really get to know my team, and how to stay cool when faced with focused drawing scary Pokemon. And why do I think using a non-meta team is something we should all give a try to? First, it's just good fun. Variety is the spice of life, and I hope I had some good games with some of the other players and they were enjoyed seeing my team. I always enjoy seeing something new or cool strategy, and I think others do as well. The more variety of teams and strategy, the better. I also think a good reason to do it is because it's rewarding. It was super rewarding to see some top meta teams being beaten by my bunch of reject Pokemon. Often, when I lost, I think it was much more my skill as a player that faltered, rather than the team. And so it does seem possible to find many of the tools you need to fight top teams without using the same old Pokemon. If I just used a meta team, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy crafting a team which counters the meta in a different way, rather than just mirroring it. Of course, there's many improvements that can be made to the team, but I found it satisfying simply to say I designed a team with obscure Pokemon that could hold its own against the best meta-designed teams. It feels like a greater achievement to do something with what people perceive to be worse raw materials. I also think it was a valuable exercise in that it gives me more knowledge in general. I had to look at different Pokemon, what they can do, think about different ways to counter things. This makes you much less susceptible to being surprised by anything yourself, because you've got a wider awareness of Pokemon that can be used. The should have been successful team, including Velocipod at the 2022 Worlds Tournament, is a testament to the value you can get from an overlooked Pokemon. Perhaps Pokemon isn't right for this team, but it might be right for one in the future, so it's always worth knowing more about your options. Going for a meta team would have just given me tunnel vision of about 20 or so Pokemon to pick from. And the final reason I think it's worth trying to play something that is totally not meta is that the challenge itself forces you to think and play in different ways. What do you do when you don't have access to the well-worn paths or crutches or particular strategies or counters? How do you counter something when the obvious isn't an option? I think playing a non-meta team is a good way to help you learn to think more widely and creatively about battling, which may enable you to come up with a combo or a strategy you wouldn't otherwise have thought of. With Scarlet and Violet looming on the horizon, it will be soon time for the 1.58% team to head off into the sunset, at least for now. But I'm glad I spent my 30 battles with them, and I hope that in the stadiums of Paldea I'll be a better battler for it.